infrastructure. A wall campaign is now.
This is the current market in Mogadishu.
NATO's military success against
many Western nations.
This is on assignment.
Hello everyone, welcome to the show. Some great stories for you this week. I'm Imran Siddiqui.
And I'm Alex Villarreal. First up, Germany 25 years later, we look again at the effects of the fall of the Berlin Wall.
U.S. immigration policy, President Obama's latest move stirring up a new political firestorm.
Then he survived capture by North Korea in 1968. VOA talks with the second in command of the USS Pueblo.
And she's a news anchor for VOA's Turkish service, but her fans call her Biker Girl.
Stick around, On Assignment is on the air.
"25 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, unified Germany is often praised for its transformation into the richest country in Europe. But the economy is not without problems. In what was West Germany, questions are being asked over continuing subsidies paid to the former East.
On top of that, renewed tensions with Russia threaten German exports and growth. VOA's Henry Ridgewell went to Germany to cover the wall fall anniversary. Here's what he had to say about the country's progress and challenges since.
After the Berlin Wall fell and German reunification in 1990, part of the deal was that West Germans, being a much richer country, would pay this solidarity tax to help the standard of living rise in the East. And the pendulum has almost swung in the opposite direction for many cities which are prospering because of their geographical location, really, and they've historically been exporting a lot to Russia as well.
Deputy Mayor Dirk Hilbert says Dresden and other eastern cities are success stories of a unified Germany.
The three cities, Dresden, Leipzig, Jena, are a prime example of a structural transformation done well.
Contrast Dresden with Dortmund, a former industrial hub in West Germany. Its unemployment rate is 12.4%, nearly double the national average, and the city is millions of dollars in debt.
It's important not to overemphasize the prosperity of the East, I think. Most economists are keen to point out that the East remains poorer than the West. Don't forget, in the West, you've got cities like Frankfurt, Mannheim, and so on, these centers of financial transactions which really generate a lot of German GDP. One thing to point out, remember Commander Hadfield at the International Space Station. One of the most famous photographs that he tweeted was a photo of Berlin, and it showed still, incredibly, a division between East and West Berlin. The lights in West Berlin were more modern and they were fluorescent white lights, and those in East Berlin are still the old sodium lights which were yellow. And to see it from that perspective, that line dividing a city, I think shows you how far still Germany has to go, although a lot of progress has been made.
So going from West Berlin into East Berlin, tell me your impressions of walking from west to east.
In the West, clearly it benefited from the prosperity of the second half of the 20th century, and it very much has that Western European feel about it. Going east and crossing over that now imaginary line, you do notice the change in architecture more than anything else. Of course, we're all familiar with that sort of brutalist, I suppose, communist architecture, the very square blocks, the very functional looking buildings that were put up by the communist authorities under the direction of the Soviet Union. And a lot of those still survive, and a lot of them are being renovated or knocked down and replaced. And so East Berlin is really very much a building site still. There's cranes everywhere. Germany has a lot of money and it's ploughing a lot of it into trying to build its capital into, I guess, a city worthy of its name.
So going forward, how will East and West continue to integrate? And, what about this tax? Is there an end in sight?
I think the debate is growing over that solidarity tax, and over the next few years, I think it probably will become more of a patchwork tax, perhaps a local council tax, something like that, where the more prosperous cities in the West continue to pay money towards bringing up the poorer places in the East. I don't think the situation can carry on much longer, whereby, for example, the mayor of Dortmund says that he's had to take out a new loan simply to pay the money to help the East, where they're doing quite well. But in terms of how the East Germans and the West Germans, former East Germans and West Germans, get on with each other, I think that every year that goes past, progress is made towards becoming a more unified country. And there is that positive feeling now that it has turned a corner, that people feel that they are 21st century citizens leading a European Union. And of course there are black marks on that horizon, not least the European Union, which is struggling for growth, and it's struggling to find really its political structure. And secondly, for East Germany, which still has strong links with Russia, harking back to the Soviet days, now the sanctions applied by the European Union and the retaliatory sanctions applied by Moscow are really cutting their trade across that border. But overall, I think still some way to go, 25 years on, but a lot of progress has been made.
And our thanks to Henry Ridgwell. He covers news from Europe for VOA.
Well, we are taking a break. When we come back, we look at that ever-contentious U.S. immigration debate. You're watching On Assignment. He's been talking about it for months, and now it is official. U.S. President Barack Obama is taking executive action to protect millions of undocumented immigrants from deportation. The decision has proven controversial politically, drawing the anger of Republicans in Congress. VOA national correspondent Jim Malone joins us now. Jim, we want to talk about this executive order. A lot of talk in Washington about this. What exactly does it do?
Well, the first thing to note, Alex, is that we have about 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. This order may affect up to about 5 million. The president has prioritized protecting a number of people from deportations. This especially includes people who have a child born in the United States who's therefore an American citizen, so they don't separate family members. So the humanitarian instincts or impact on this are going to be widespread, so it affects a lot of people in a very deep way.
Now, there's been a push for a long time to get Congress, specifically the House, to pass legislation on immigration reform. Why has President Obama had to now take the step to do it on his own?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, they have had time. They don't seem to be willing to move ahead with immigration reform. There are too many conservatives in Congress who oppose anything like reform leading to what they would see as amnesty for people who broke the law. So they're going to oppose that. President also his party suffered some setbacks in the elections just a few weeks ago. I think the president perhaps decided, and this is what analysts believe, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. This is delivering on a political pledge, by the way, on immigration he made early in his administration, and it's good politics for Democrats. They want to keep especially Hispanic voters energized, especially as you look forward to the next presidential election in 2016.
Now, talking about this political battle, some Republicans in Congress have called this move, this unilateral action, illegal, and they say they're going to fight it. But what can they actually do, and can they really stop it?
They're not cohesive yet on what they want to do, on how they want to respond. They say it's going to poison the well for future cooperation. Some are talking about cutting funding. There's talk of perhaps another government shutdown in the attempt to block the president on this. But it also seems like Republican congressional leaders who won the election, they want to show they can govern Congress and the country. So they may be trying to dissuade their more conservative members from some sort of showdown on this. So they may be in a position where they're going to disappoint some of the more conservative members. It's going to exploit those divisions within the Republican Party on immigration, and that could haunt them well into the next presidential election, when history shows they should have a good chance to win the White House. But if they can't win over any Hispanic voters, or at least relatively few, that puts them in a politically weak position.
All right, Jim, our go-to guy on all things political, Jim Malone, thank you so much. We'll be watching this closely. All right, we are taking a break now. On the other side, a flashback to an international crisis of long ago. You're watching On Assignment. North Korea no longer has any U.S. citizens known to be in custody after releasing 3 detained Americans in recent weeks. Now, these detainees are the latest in a history of such captures. For nearly a year in 1968, 82 crew members of the USS Pueblo were held in North Korea after their ship was captured.
VOA's Kane Farabah got the chance to talk about the ordeal with Ed Murphy, who was a commanding officer back then on the Pueblo. Our Philip Alexia caught up with Kane for more on what is known as the Pueblo incident.
Ed Murphy was second in command of the USS Pueblo while on a mission in the Sea of Japan to gather intelligence on Soviet and North Korean activity. He says several ships had harassed the Pueblo for days, but on January 23, 1968, North Korean torpedo boats opened fire on his poorly equipped vessel.
What happened was that they had been harassed a few times in the lead up to the attack by several vessels that had come close to their ship or had just basically taken pictures of what they were doing. It wasn't until they were actually fired upon in what would be the final sort of antagonistic maneuver that they realized that they were in trouble, and the ship wasn't equipped to defend itself. Ed Murphy even said that they had some weapons, but they just weren't able to use those weapons to defend themselves.
It was an exchange of fire, but it was one way. Yes, we didn't fire. We couldn't man the weapon.
The attack killed 1 sailor. Murphy and 9 others were wounded.
And really the focus when the attack began at that point was that there was this inevitability that they were going to be captured and taken prisoner. So the impetus was to destroy the classified material that was on that ship. And that was an effort that they did not at all succeed in. I mean, there was classified material left on the ship when the North Koreans eventually took it over.
So Ed Murphy said that they could not man the weapons. Why was that?
I think that is the source of some disagreement, some controversy. It was ultimately something that came up when there was an inquiry after they were released. They had done this before. They were simply there on a routine surveillance mission. There wasn't any sort of inclination that they would be engaged. And by the point at which they would have been able to fully operate that weapon, the ship had already been taken over by the North Koreans.
So the North Koreans board the ship. Describe what he told you about being captured. I assume he went into some detail about that as well, what it was like to be held captive for 11 months.
Yeah, well, before he was actually captured in that firing action, and when the assault began, Ed Murphy was hit. He was injured. They were actually taken off the ship, and they were taken to land onto North Korea, and they were transported around a few different places. Once they got to land in North Korea, that's where Ed Murphy says the saga or the episode for him really began, and that was the start of 11 months of verbal and physical abuse and mental and physical torture.
They're beating you with rifle butts and karate kicking you. They actually beat the side of my head where my earlobe was actually separated.
He had also explained, too, that there was a board that was placed behind his kneecaps on both of his legs. And there was this method by which the board could be pressed into his knees that caused his knees to become separated. He's never been able to run with his kids, and that, the way in which he walks today, to him in some ways, is a lasting reminder of that torture in North Korea almost 40 years ago.
Is the USS Pueblo the only ship in the United States held captive anywhere in the world?
That's correct. Currently, it is the only ship, and actually it's one of the oldest commissioned ships in the U.S. Navy. As a matter of fact, the only other ship that's still commissioned, which is older than the USS Pueblo, is the USS Constitution, Old Ironsides.
So how does that make Ed feel that the ship is still over there? Because he had made mention of that in your report, that it still bothers him.
Well, that was one of the final questions I had. I had explained to Ed Murphy that we had some footage that one of our language services at Voice of America had gathered, which is taking a tour of the USS Pueblo. And he said he'd be interested to see that, and that it is a real travesty or tragedy that that ship didn't come home with its crew.
Because that's not a very friendly country toward Americans. Their people are trained to hate us.
Does he remain in touch with any of the crew members today?
He does, and there are reunions that the crew gets together. But the thing that he says strikes him the most is that the behavior of the North Koreans hasn't changed much. The tactics of using hostages as a propaganda value. We're now in 2014, and he says it's sad that he sees some of these same events playing out, 45 years later. There's so much history in between now and what happened with him that he would have thought that some of these things would have changed. But to him, it's kind of a tragedy or a travesty that he sees a lot of these things unfolding.
Next up, most of us here at VOA know Celine Unlu as the anchor of the Turkish TV program TGRT Live. But to motorcycle fans in Turkey, she's known as Biker Girl, also the title of her blog about riding.
Yeah, and Celine started riding motorcycles back home in Turkey, but now she runs a YouTube channel about her trips across America. And she told me about her dual life as anchor and motorcyclist.
I'm a woman on a motorcycle, and it's the creative idea actually, because in most of the countries, or maybe in many of the countries, there aren't as many women riders as the male riders. That it's in Turkey, it's a male-dominant culture also. So we just wanted to emphasize that I'm a woman on a motorcycle, and it was, actually crazy for many people.
So how did you get started riding?
Well, actually, when I met my husband, he was riding, and we were on a holiday, and we went to a place, and we rented a motorcycle. And then I said, I just want to, be on the motorcycle with you. I mean, not just on a motorcycle. Maybe we can rent 2 motorcycles if I can ride. And it was like a few minutes of introduction, and I was on it, and I guess it was in my blood, and I was so happy, and it just all started like that, almost 11 or 12 years ago. Yeah, it's been almost 12 years.
Now tell us about your blog.
Well, actually, I was already working as a reporter and international broadcaster in VOA, and then we were launching some blogs, and everybody was coming with the ideas. And I just came up with this idea, and my supervisors were like, wow, this is a bit crazy, but we should try, because this reflects another perspective of my persona. I mean, rather than being just a reporter, it was kind of something related to my personality. That's why I just wanted to start with that. And with this Biker Girl name that we chose for the blog, there's a famous male Turkish singer, and there's a song he sings, and it's named Biker Girl, and he says in the lyrics, Biker girl, I've been looking for you for so long, and where are you? And so it was kind of a mysterious phrase in Turkish, so we just wanted to use it, Biker girl in the United States.
Tell us about some of the videos that you showcase. You have a YouTube channel, and on there you show some of the trips that you've taken across the country.
Yeah, there's a great interest in my YouTube channel, because I know that it is a lifelong dream for many of the Turkish motorcyclists to come to the States and maybe to complete the historic route 66, and I knew that they just wanted to have an idea how the roads look like, how is a road trip would look like if they are in the United States, and it was the interesting part. That's why I just wanted to showcase those videos on YouTube. And I have actually not many videos on YouTube, but they have garnered more than 150,000 views.
And let's talk about those 2 personas that you have, because a lot of people would view those as being very different. You've got your motorcycling on one side, and then you've got your, very serious political news anchoring on the other. So how do you balance the 2?
Well, actually, I wanted the audience to see my other side, because it's like when you do something which is, so to speak, crazy for many people and terrifying for many people, just gives the audience an idea that this might be interesting. Let's see what she's talking about, and it gives me an edge in thinking out of the box when I'm working on any news coverage or any news item. And actually being an anchor on live TV in a strong affiliate in Turkey just makes you a little bit stressful all the time, because it's like 5 days a week. And a motorcyclist, there's a saying among the motorcyclists, it's like you don't need therapy if you have a motorcycle. So it is really helpful in beating up the stress that you have during the day. So it helps me a lot.
And in a way, are you trying to give your audience an outlet for themselves to de-stress?
Yeah, actually, and they like the stories when I talk about stress and how to, beat stress through motorcycling. I know that they have pretty much interest in those subjects. And in my political show, of course, I cannot talk about my hobbies, but motorcycle is not just a hobby for me, it's a passion. And I just wanted the audience to know that I'm a passionate person, and it helps. It helps for them to identify themselves. It's not just a mere presenter that they are listening to. It's not just the news they are listening to. It's a real person with a real persona, and it's like breathing just like you and me. So it helped a lot.
All right, changing gears now from motorcycles in Turkey to wine in Lebanon. In some of the most volatile parts of Lebanon where refugees have fled from Syria, winemaking is one industry that continues to flourish.
And Lebanese winemakers say that after surviving their own brutal civil war in the 70s and the 80s, they can survive anything. Heather Murdoch has the story.
Protecting our fruits with the...
Meet Ramzi Grosin, one of the owners of Messiah, a small winery in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. Grosin and other winemakers in Lebanon say exporting their product also means exporting their culture.
Wine is not about just a product, it's about the people behind the wine that makes a difference. That's what makes a difference. First of all, my brother and I are from the war generation. The war, I mean the 75, 92 period. So we were small at the beginning of the war, and we, like many others, we went abroad to learn, to study, and eventually and to work too. But instead of settling abroad, we decided to come back to our country because we think we have a different culture, a different personality here.
Grosin says Lebanese wines can teach buyers about Lebanon's unique beauty, something often overshadowed by news of Middle East wars. He says winemakers here are resilient enough to keep doing business despite the battles in nearby Syria.
I mean, Damascus is 15 minutes behind these mountains. We saw worse. I mean, I'm terribly sorry for the people who are suffering over there. But as a Lebanese, I think we saw dear situations and we overcame them. So you have to adjust your business plan accordingly.
Across the street from the vineyard is a stark reminder of just how much plans have changed for businesses in Bekaa since the Syrian war began in 2011. Most of the more than 1 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon, a country of fewer than 5 million people, live here in Bekaa, stretching its land and its economy to the limit. But at one of Lebanon's oldest and largest wineries, Domaine des Tourelles, co-owner Fauzi Issa says business is thriving in this region, with Lebanese wines gaining international acclaim and dozens of wineries opening their doors. To further expand in international markets, though, he says Lebanese winemakers first have to let buyers know Lebanon makes wine at all.
And that's the game that I think Lebanese wines has to play everywhere, in really tackling all the markets that has enough experience in wine tastings, and tell them, yes, Lebanon is not only a country that has the current problems. No, we have beautiful wines. We have people that really can produce great wines and can be exportable.
Lebanon produces 9 to 10 million bottles of wine a year, which is tiny compared to major giants like France, which produces 7 to 8 billion bottles a year. But winemakers here say they're not trying to compete with Europe because their wine, like their country, is different from any other in the world. Heather Murdoch for VOA News, Bekaa Valley, Lebanon.
And our thanks to Heather for that look at a different side of life in Lebanon. That does it for our show this week.
It does, but you can always check out On Assignment and all the top news 24/7 on our website, voanews.com.
On behalf of everyone here at VOA On Assignment, thank you so much for watching.